Happy 3-0 Vikings fans. Yes, we are 3-0. We are undefeated and kings of the North, at least for the moment. Welcome to another episode of Mike on the Vikes. This is Season 2, Episode 3, if you're keeping track on the podcast. Otherwise, if you're on YouTube here, welcome aboard. As you can see, I'm trying a new font text box thing. As you know, this is a very low-budget operation, a work in progress, trying to make it look decent. But anyway, let's not bury the lead. The Vikings are 3-0. They take care of the Texans 34-7. And the best thing about this is that now it's 3 weeks in a row where the games have not only have we won all three, but they've not really been in jeopardy. I know the Niners win was in one possession, but by the time the Niners had gotten within one possession, they needed an onside kick and they had 0 timeouts, and the game was well in hand anyway. And then this game was never really in doubt. I mean, I'm sure in the back of all Vikings fans' minds was, okay, this is C.J. Stroud. This Texans team's up and coming. 14-0, not safe. 21-0, not safe. But it was, because we played really well. And I want to talk about some of the things we did well today, as well as I have 5 takeaways you can see on the screen. I'll explain them in more depth. And those of you listening on the podcast, I'll obviously explain them so you understand what I'm saying. But, I can nitpick some things that we did wrong, and I'll mention a couple of those things as I go through. But we've got to be happy. We've got to be ecstatic with where the Vikings are right now. Not only are we 3-0, we have 2 NFC wins, one against the reigning NFC champion, and 2 of our 3 wins are against playoff teams. I don't think anyone is going to doubt the fact that the Niners and the Texans will be in the playoff mix come December. I know the Niners lost a close one to the Rams. Somehow the Rams are so competitive. Either Stafford's a genius, McVay's a genius, or both. But I didn't catch much of that game, to be honest. I was following the score, but I didn't really check to see how it looked, so I'm not going to comment on Rams-Niners. But anyway, my point is, we have 2 out of 3 wins against really good teams, and who knows, the Giants just beat the Browns. Browns have a good defense, so somehow, I don't know, the NFL feels like it's upside down a little bit right now, but I love that because here the Vikings are at 3-0 after another big win. So my 5 takeaways, and again, I'm not going to even touch on all the great things, like how great of a story Camus Hill, I knew I was going to butcher his name. I tried my best to practice beforehand. It didn't go over very well. Comes in, makes an immediate impact. We have Ivan Pace out with an injury, Dallas Turner out with an injury, and it didn't matter. Our defensive players stepped up, especially journeyman Camus Hill. Gets the early interception off the nice Harrison Phillips block pass. Harrison Phillips had a good game overall in general as well, and so these guys are flying to the ball, next man up. It's just all of the sports cliches that you see in the positive direction going on for the Vikings right now. So my first takeaway has to be the defense. I know our offense had its moments, and Sam Darnold had some stats, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but this defense has just outperformed all expectations, and we knew we were going to be good. I knew we had a good defense, but we weren't sure. On one hand, this is where Darnold will get some credit. Like, the offense is moving and is threatening enough to where our defense doesn't have to do it all. But if we take a look at what our defense has done, they have just constantly been great. And I haven't even dove into all the stats. We had 5 sacks this game. And then my favorite part about it is that they weren't like broken down blocking coverages where we get all the pressure right off the bat. Maybe a couple of them were, but part of the biggest reason why we got 5 sacks, and shout out Jonathan Grenard, he got 3 of them. I'm sure that felt good against his former team. But C.J. Stroud looked very hesitant. He looked indecisive. He looked like, and one of the things I love most about C.J. Stroud is how naturally he plays the quarterback position, how effortlessly his arm strength is, or how effortless his arm strength is. Excuse me. And he looked uncomfortable today. He held the ball longer than I think he wanted to, waiting for things to develop. And I think that obviously our guys played well, but you got to give credit to the coverage champion, Brian Flores. So that's my number 1 takeaway. It's up on the screen for you people on YouTube. The coverage champion, Brian Flores. You never know. I mean, we saw the Brock Purdy quote from last week. He's got a crazy defense. And then you see Stroud in week 3. He probably has no idea who's going to drop back into coverage, who's going to come and apply pressure. And so I just hope we can keep that up all season, because if we can, I mean, the sky's the limit, because this defense is on its way to becoming a top 10, maybe even top 5 defense, especially if our offense keeps playing the way it's playing and the turnover margin continues to expand in our favor. So I don't even have to go into too much depth. The broadcast did a nice job of saying, like, it doesn't look like a cover 2 shell, and then it's a cover 2 shell, right? Like, we were just making making them think so hard to decide where to go with the ball, and it was leading to bad decisions, bad throws. Timing was off for the Texans, and getting that first interception deep in their territory and scoring, like Houston couldn't run the ball either. So kudos to our defense for that. We were stifling against the run, and they couldn't commit to it either because before you blinked and the Vikings were up 14-0 in the first quarter, 21-0 in the second quarter, and I'm sure they felt like, well, we got to get going here somewhere. Now, some of it was self-imposed. If there are any detractors out there right now, they're going to say, well, Houston knocked themselves back a million times with all those false starts and line formation penalties on Laramie Tunsil and things like that. So, there was a lot of that factor as well. And so I think if this happens again, if this were to happen again, this matchup, or God forbid it's a Super Bowl, matchup, not saying it will be, but the Texans are a very good team, and 34-7 is a little bit of an anomaly, but that shouldn't take away from the fact that we won this game handily, because they would have had ample opportunities on drives without penalties, where they could have played better as well and could have been less confused. So I think all of that goes hands in hand. Our crowd today, if anyone's watching this that was at the game, kudos to you. I think that at least accounted for a couple of the false starts. And I mean, even if it's just 5 yards, you can tell you're in the opponent's head when they're doing that stuff. So kudos to the crowd, kudos to the defense. Brian Flores, takeaway number 1, coverage champion. If we can keep this up all season, this might be one of the best. Well, I'm not gonna say anything that'll jinx it. My desk is wood, so I'm knocking on wood right now. Don't worry, I'm not gonna say anything too crazy. So let's just move on to takeaway number 2. We're running the ball, and we're not the best rushing offense in the league, and that's fine. We're 14th in the league actually in yards per game at just under 130. I think it's 128.6, the stat I saw, but it doesn't matter. We don't need to be the best in the league. Last year we didn't even get to 100 as an average. We were at, I think, like 96. And so that's a good 30 plus, more than 30 yards improved per game on this small 3-game sample size. But, Aaron Jones had 102 rushing yards today. He's over the century mark. Like, you have to run the ball in this league. And I know I've said it as ad nauseum, and I've already celebrated our early success running the ball, but now we've been over 100 yards in all 3 games to start the season, and I love that. So we're getting push from our offensive line. We're opening up holes. Aaron Jones looks great. In fact, I went up against him in fantasy today, and I was a little upset at how well he did. I'm just kidding. I wasn't upset. Your team always comes before your fantasy team. Let's be serious. And I'm a fantasy analyst too, so but I have my priorities straight. But either way, he looked great. Ty Chandler, I think, is still got a chance to be great too. And honestly, like, we had a couple short fields. Like, we didn't even have the amount of attempts that we probably could have, just because the game script was so much in our favor. But I just love the fact that we've committed enough to it. Our attempts are healthy. Like, it doesn't feel like we're only passing, and so 14th in the league, I'm perfectly fine with that. We don't need to have the best rushing offense. We don't need to have the most rushing touchdowns, the best yards per carry. We just need defenses to know, well, this team can do it. So if they can do that, we have to account for it. And then that keeps everything in balance, and everything. The universe is fully in balance, right? Because the universe revolves around Vikings football, right? So takeaway number 2 is that our rushing offense is now 14th in yards per game. And we didn't have a particularly amazing day today. Let me double check. Yeah, we had 118 total rushing yards. But again, I mentioned, we had some short fields in some of our drives, and Aaron Jones got over 100 and had 19 carries. Like, that's a really healthy, really above average stat line. And if we can continue that trend, life is good there. So 14th in the league yards per game, takeaway number 2. Takeaway number 3, this is one of those fun stats where you kind of get a feeling your team is good at this, and so you look it up, and then it proves it right. We're second in the entire league in yards per play at 6.8. Amazing. Excuse me. I've been battling a little bit of a sore throat, if you can't tell by how my voice sounds, so I apologize for that. So my third takeaway is that the Vikings are averaging 6.8 yards per play, which is second in the entire league through 3 games. And it's not a super fancy stat, and 6.8 is definitely not like so many more yards ahead of the next few teams that it's that amazing, relatively speaking. But it's important to me as a stat because what it says is we're avoiding situations of 2nd and 20, 3rd and 15, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 12. We're doing a good job of avoiding those lower percentage downs with conversion rates. Now we still get some of those. We can still convert them. We have Jefferson. We have the weapons to do that. But it's just such a healthy indicator of an offense that can move the ball that's why I like it. So if we were 8th in the NFL, I'd be probably sharing the stat tonight. If we were even 12th, I'd be like, yeah, it's pretty good. But we're 2nd through 3 games, and that's against 2 great defenses. Let's not bury the lead here again. San Francisco's got a great defense. Houston has a great defense. And we are finding ways to do it. So I think a lot of credit should go to Kevin O'Connell so far for the games he's calling. Justin Jefferson is still worth every penny to me in terms of being the most expensive receiver in football. He's our only legitimate threat. Like, Jalen Naylor's done some nice things, but we can't, with a straight face, say he's a legitimate outside threat yet. We don't have T.J. Hawkinson. We don't have Jordan Addison. Aaron Jones out of the backfield, sure. Ty Chandler out of the backfield, sure. But from a wide receiver standpoint, we have one, and we just happen to have the best one. And every team knows he's going to get the ball, and he's still getting the ball and getting open. And he had that one weird, uncharacteristic drop in a second half that didn't see him put up really any yards. I think he was completely shut out at one point, and then he had that drop that would have converted to the first down, which would have been a nice icing on the cake for the game. So I can't remember if he got a catch or 2 after that, but he finished with another healthy stat line. I mean, he had 6 catches for 81 yards on 8 targets, and again, with some short fields and with the game in hand, like, it's hard to use those numbers and be like, well, we should probably get him the ball more. Not to mention, Darnold didn't even throw for 200 yards. And so there wasn't enough to go around anyway, and he's still getting the most of it. So anyway, all of that is to say, kudos to him, kudos to Kevin O'Connell, kudos to Sam Darnold, who I'm going to talk about in a second. Like, this offense is moving the ball at a perfectly fine pace. It's not super explosive all the time. 97-yard touchdown passes notwithstanding. But 6.8 yards per play, 2nd in the league. That is a healthy number, and I just love that it's not one of those, like, 2 years ago, I'm going to reference this a lot, because 2 years ago we won 11 games by 1 score. Super exciting season. Kirk played well. JJ played well. We couldn't stop anybody, and that's why we lost to the Giants in the playoffs. But, it was a fun team to watch, but it's so stressful because we'd go through spurts. We'd have a couple explosive drives and be like, nobody can stop this offense. But then we'd have a couple of drives where we had 3 and out, and take barely a minute off the clock. And those are the ones that prevented us from building leads and sustaining leads. And so I think this this iteration of the Vikings offense, this season's iteration of the Vikings offense, it can sustain drives. It can eat up clock. It can do things more methodically, but then have an explosive play here and there. It's got balance. Maybe that's the key word for this whole thing right now, is balance, because we have the defense who's playing at top level and an offense that's doing not just, I wouldn't say just managing and just kind of being there. They're capitalizing. And I'll explain that in a second coming up. But anyway, my third takeaway is the 6.8 yards per play. One of my gut instincts was like, we have to be one of the better teams at how many yards we get every time, just on average. And we're 2nd in the league, so that's an exciting stat to be to have or to own. Takeaway number 4, the quarterback's the most important position on the field. This team, we knew we were going to have a good defense. We didn't know what Darnold we were going to get. We didn't know if we were going to get the Darnold with the arm strength that got drafted in the top 5, or were we going to get the Darnold that couldn't sustain any success in New York, had a few good games in Carolina, which is still kind of what worries me, is that he started his stint in Carolina with some nice games. And so my fear is that, teams figure him out. So I'm trying to keep things realistic, because it's only 3 games, but I'm also going to enjoy the ride because this has been a great 3 games. So anyway, and then or are we going to get backup Sam Darnold, who would never see the field in San Francisco? Not that he would have gotten the opportunity anyway. My point being, Sam Darnold was always going to be the wild card, and so you have to talk about him in terms of this early season success, because he's been a huge part of it. Again, the quarterback has to be. And you can see on the screen, those of you on the podcast can't see this, but I wrote Smart Sam Darnold. And so you're seeing the talent blended, for the most part, with smart decisions. Now, it's not been perfect. Whatever those shovel passes he was trying, I was about to lose my mind. Don't do that. It harkens back to last season's terrible image of Nick Mullins falling over in the Bengals game and just, instead of just covering up the ball, just handing off to the Bengals defensive lineman for a turnover, right? That stuff scares me. Don't do the little shovel passes. That's really low percentage. There's a lot that can go wrong there. But outside of that, he's been very smart. His throws have been accurate. His throws have been in spots where only our guys can make plays. I mean, the touchdown pass to Johnny Munt today was an awesome pass. And when you see him do it, you're like, what are you doing? Like, there's three guys around Johnny Munt in the middle. Like, he's not exactly Justin Jefferson. And that's where you're going for this touchdown pass. But then on the replay, you did see that if you have the arm strength, there was a window there, and it was perfect, right on the money. Johnny Munt did a great job securing it, not letting it bounce off him, and so it looked like it was a pass into coverage. Or it didn't look like it. It was. There was a lot of coverage there, but I think it was a good time to be aggressive, right? I think it was he knew his ability, and so it's also maybe a little nod to the confidence he's playing with right now with Kevin O'Connell. And a lot of people are saying, well, is there more confidence now because JJ McCarthy's hurt and he has no one breathing down his neck? He is not going to have the fans calling for Nick Mullins to come in over him, right? Sure, that could be all part of the mental game, but whatever's going in through his mind, he is playing with confidence. He's making smart plays for the most part, and he deserves a lot of credit for this win and a lot of credit for the Vikings being 3-0. And you saw when he got hurt that I'm not the only one to appreciate it. It's obvious. We have to appreciate what he's doing, but it was a really nice moment when he goes into the tent. I have to double check. I think I saw something where he might be in line for an MRI or something to check out whatever's happening. I'm going to try to look that up and do this at the same time. Yeah, he's going to undergo an MRI for a knee injury. And that obviously is scary. Now, he only missed one play because he had to come off, and Nick Mullins came in for that one play. And so this MRI business is scary, but he said he felt good. He obviously only missed one play, came in and played just fine. And so hopefully there's nothing long-term that's going to really derail this, because that would just be our luck, wouldn't it? Just like Kirk playing an MVP season last year and tearing his Achilles, that would just be brutal. So I hope this MRI is fine, but that I'm sure in the next couple days we'll find out what's going on there. But regardless, the point I was trying to bring up is he comes in after that one play, he had to sit out, and the crowd just gives this epic standing ovation. Like, good on the crowd. Again, the crowd today, I mean, I'm sure it's easy to cheer for for a team that's 3-0, but seriously, the bank was rocking today. Everyone was loud. It was awesome, and that was a great moment for Sam Darnold to be, I'm sure he didn't feel super appreciated as the Jets quarterback, and he maybe didn't do enough to deserve that either, but it must have been a nice feeling for him to come onto a standing O, like, hey, we recognize what you're doing out here. So just one of those good moments you have when you're 3-0 and when things are going well. So anyway, fourth takeaway from tonight and kind of the whole season so far, Sam Darnold getting the credit he deserves, because he's been great. And again, he didn't even throw for 200 yards. And so that number will need to go up over time. But again, I think the way the game was going, it made sense, and wasn't like a bad thing. And he had 4 touchdown passes and no interceptions. So, I don't care if you only throw for 90 yards. If you have 4 touchdown passes, something is going well. Something is going right. So, kudos Sam Darnold. That's the fourth takeaway. And the fifth takeaway for tonight is really boring, because it reminds us that all these stats and all these things we analyze ad nauseum don't matter nearly as much as a simple stat called the turnover margin. And, if you followed me for any amount of time, you know that last year's big issue on my head was our turnover situation was awful. In addition to not being able to run the ball and like injuries to the quarterbacks and a number of other things, we were so far behind in the turnover battle. It cost us so many games that we were we were knocking on the door of the playoffs last year, and if we had like 10 less turnovers, we probably would have been in as a wild card. It's as simple as that. And today we were +2. And not only were we +2, but we had 14 points off those turnovers. Our first touchdown was because we started at the 21 because of that Camus Grugier-Hill interception off the Harrison Phillips deflection. And so not only did we get 2 turnovers, but we got 14 points off turnovers. So we got 6 both times. So huge. It's so huge when you're trying to build a lead and send a message to the other team like, yeah, you have to play perfect from now on, because if you don't, we're going to make you pay. On the flip side, we had 0 turnovers. So we were +2. We were even on the season going into today, and so I think we are now +2, unless I feel like my own numbers are sketchy on that, so we'll have to feel free to fact check me there. But I believe now, after being +2 today, we are now +2 on the whole season, because we had 2 picks, 2 turnovers after Sam had 2 picks, and we had 2 fumbles overall, and 4 takeaways overall going into this game, I believe. So, anyway, whenever you win the turnover battle, you're in great shape, right? Yes, great teams can overcome it sometimes, sure, but because of the game-changing momentum, and in our case, field position, I mean, receiving the ball in the third quarter was also huge, and their first drive ends in a pick, and we get a short field for a touchdown. Like, you can't draw it up any better than that. That's an ideal start, and so not all starts are going to be that ideal, but when you are on the right side of the turnover margin, you create more of those situations versus more of the situations that the Texans had to face, and then you could tell they were a little bit rattled. Our defense was confusing. The crowd was loud. Their offensive line couldn't line up correctly. It was all downhill from there for the Houston Texans, and so and for the benefit of the Minnesota Vikings. So anyway, that's my 5th takeaway, +2 in the turnover margin. If you're listening on the podcast, and sorry for you two people who've been staring at the same thing for the whole time because I'm not creative with my text boxes. My 5 takeaways for today: Brian Flores, coverage champion, confusing C.J. Stroud, confusing Brock Purdy, and now I don't see there's a quarterback he can't confuse. We're 14th in yards per game as a rushing offense at just under 130, and while that's not elite, that's perfectly fine for me as long as we're around that range of about 120, 130 yards per game. We're second in the league in 6.8 yards per play. Sam Darnold has been playing smart, and the 5th one is the +2 turnover margin. And folks, these are just 5 takeaways, like the things that are at the forefront of my brain. Again, so many other factors that if you want to talk about, go ahead and talk about, right? There are obviously things that to improve on, and I'm sure the coaching staff from the film this week will get in and say, well, we still got to do that better, still got to block that play better, et cetera, et cetera. But, I mean, we have to feel good about being 3-0, especially with 2 wins against these teams, right? The league was crazy today. Denver dominates Tampa Bay, and so I think showing a little bit of the fraudulent side of the Buccaneers. The Raiders beat the Ravens, and then come back and lose to the Andy Dalton-led Carolina Panthers. Maybe they were just playing on adrenaline, so who knows? And it's still super early, but you can't overestimate the importance of the early games, especially when 2 of them are conference opponents. So we're putting ourselves in a really nice spot where if we can compete within our division, and we have a tough division, right? So when we go to Lambeau next week, and so that'll be the first test, and who knows if Jordan Love will be back. It doesn't really matter because Malik Willis, they found a way to play well with Malik Willis, and their defense gave the Titans fits. So even with Malik Willis, it's not going to be a walk in the park for the Vikings at Lambeau next week. So we got to get some divisional wins, obviously, but it's going to be a battle in the black and blue. And even if we go 3-3, I mean, plus our 3 wins now, we're 6-3, right? Perfect spot to make a run at the playoffs. And so I just love the start. I love the vibes. I love how we're playing. I love Brian Flores. I love Kevin O'Connell. I love Sam Darnold. I love Justin Jefferson. I mean, it's all sunshine and rainbows here in Minnesota right now. So, Vikings fans, enjoy your Sunday night victory. Have a fun, positive Purple Monday tomorrow as you start your work week. You can find me on X at JLime8 if you have any things you want to dispute, discuss, or commiserate with. And MikeOnTheVikes.com, where there's really nothing because I've been focusing on this plus some stuff I'm doing over at Bite Size Sports. So that's the other shout out, BiteSizeSports.com. You'll find out some fun content there. We have a great NFL show called Necessary Roughness on Tuesdays, and then myself and Trevor do the Another Damn Fantasy podcast on Wednesday nights for Bite Size. So tons of great stuff going on over there with Kevin, the guys. So please check that out. Bite Size as well. Give me a follow on Twitter, or just Talk Vikings. And yeah, thanks.